All right, we've got everybody here today. We've got the cat, Goose, the cat named Goose, and we have we have another AmeriCorps alum who's joining us today, Craig Wiroll, and we're going to get into his story. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. You all have no idea where. I already know where it's going to end up, but y'all are going to be like, "What the what?" But before we get started, for those of you that are just stumbling upon this YouTube or this podcast, my name's Nikki Fiacco, and I'm the founder of AmeriCorps Connections. And my goal is really to reach out and connect with as many AmeriCorps alumni as possible. We have 1.2 million of us who have served. So I'm going to hit a tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction. Some of y'all might know that this is a really important period of time for us AmeriCorps alums to be getting out there and telling our stories. AmeriCorps alumni, our AmeriCorps funding is always slated to be cut from the federal government, but the times are getting really, really real, folks. So if you went through this program and you were transformed and you were impacted and your community was affected, we need to get out and tell our stories. So definitely reach out to me or your senator or whoever and talk about what your service year is. But before we get started, I also want to give a shout out to Time is Money by Dan Medevere, who helped me get this podcast up off the ground. He is a NCCC alumni, and he was one of the first alumni to step forward and say, I don't necessarily need to be on your podcast, but let me give you some pointers on how to make it sound better and look better. And he's still helping me. So thank you so much, Dan. All right. Now we're going to turn it over to our guest, Craig. But before we get started, I don't know if you remember, but when we pre-interviewed a couple months ago, you said that Forrest Gump was your favorite movie and that you're trying to live a Forrest Gump life. I'm just going to give you for those of you that are watching and listening, I'm just going to give a short list. If you go to his LinkedIn page, this is a short list of everything that you might find on there. Number one, I always look for the AmeriCorps. So that was 2 years of NCCC out west. You were also a VISTA Medical Reserve Corps member, a speechwriter, a game show contestant, worked for the University of Oregon, a White House intern, worked for Peace Corps, and a ton of other things. So I think that you're really on your way for living that Forrest Gump life for sure. But let's get started. Let's start with your service year and see where this conversation and journey ends up. So Craig, how did you get started with AmeriCorps?
I was researching AmeriCorps while I was in undergrad. And so in undergrad, I really didn't want to go to college. No one in my family had ever gone, but I was told, back when I was the early 2000s, that's what you do if you want to have any chance at life. And I was tricked into that. So I saw myself as a filmmaker from a young age and did make several short films with friends. And it was my passion for sure. While making my first full-length feature film, my personal life kind of fell apart, my family life, and I lost my footage to all my first film. And I was distraught, and I kind of lost the passion at that point. So I continued on. I was thinking about doing Second City in Chicago because a lot of my heroes from SNL, they did Second City. I even ended up contacting someone from Mad TV, which was like a SNL ripoff, and asked him what I should major in because I went to school originally for film and then felt like this is too experimental. This isn't the narrative type of film I want to study. And Frank Caliendo, the comedian, he said, well, I studied journalism at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Why don't you try that out? So I did. And it was a very practical program, and I enjoyed it and found my first mentor of my life in that program, luckily, but it had nothing to do with service. But I was, straight edge, clear-minded. I think looking back, it wasn't because of morals that I didn't drink or do drugs. It was just because both I'm a nerd, but I have I'm a bit of a control freak, and that comes from everyone in my family. So I like to be in control a good amount of the time in terms of like deciding what I do. So if you're sober in undergrad, what do? You either focus on your classes and your grades, which is not something I would ever do. So instead I got out in the community, which for me was Milwaukee, and started volunteering nonstop. So every moment I wasn't in class, I was volunteering at a different community organization. And if you know anything about Milwaukee, Wisconsin, super diverse city, but there's historic redlining, historic inequality. there's a lot of help needed. So there was no shortage of nonprofits and organizations that would take me in to do volunteer hours. So I spent most of my time doing that anyway. So when I learned that there was potential that I could get paid, even though it was maybe $2 or $4 an hour upon graduation, my mind just shifted. Like, I'm no longer a filmmaker. Now I'm a public servant and I want to do service. And of course, my mentors and journalism professors were like, well, what does that have to do with your degree? It has nothing to do with it. And I was like, no, I'm already bought and sold. I'm going to AmeriCorps, considered Peace Corps, but it felt way too daunting for me at the time. Like I said, I'm a first generation student. No one in my family had traveled anywhere in the world. So AmeriCorps felt like the safe, to most people, it doesn't sound like a safe bet, but to me, it was the safest one. So I ended up, like you said, doing AmeriCorps VISTA upon graduation, which brought me out west from the Midwest in Wisconsin to Oregon. And my first year was just a complete mess, a complete S show. I don't know if you can say naughty words on here.
You can say naughty words.
Okay. I don't want to say too many, but
I always click the not made for children.
Okay, great. Complete shit show. I didn't end up meeting my new boss, my new supervisor, until about 26 days in on the site. And I was told it was called the Medical Reserve Corps because a lot of the people I was doing this with, it was disaster relief and disaster resilience work, but mostly medical. It was for a lot of pre-med people who want to go on to be doctors, which was never my intention. I used it more as a tool to get to a place in the world I wanted to be, doing service in Oregon, which was my favorite state that I was able to visit, but also I had a partner studying at Oregon State University, so it was the perfect fit. But like I said, I don't meet my supervisor for 26 days. She finally shows up and she hands me a binder that's about 12 inches thick. And she says, here, just study this for the next month or two. I'm trying to take all my leave before I quit my job so I can keep my benefits. Don't tell anyone. Well, now I just told everyone. But at the time, as a scared kind of like 22-year-old, 23-year-old, whatever I was, who had just moved across the country for the first time in my life, I felt very alone and isolated. And my partner was busy with grad school. So I was like, I made a huge mistake.
Wow.
Yeah, it was scary. And, you know, I had this love for service and I knew AmeriCorps was a great program. I knew that I just got a bad placement. I was unlucky. So I asked for a replacement and they gave me 3 options. They said, you can go a couple hours away to a pretty good sounding program. You could go 20 minutes away to a pretty bad sounding program where they already had a VISTA and they didn't need any more help, or you can quit. And I didn't want to be a quitter. And I cared more about my relationship at that time than I did about my personal well-being. So I took the one that was about 15, 20 minutes away that sounded like a slightly different shit show from the one I was already partaking in.
We do love AmeriCorps, by the way, folks. Like,
this has a happy ending. I swear it does.
If people are listening to this podcast on a regular basis, they will find that this is sometimes a theme where it's like, I had no idea what I was signing up for. It was a total shit show, but in the end, I was able to But go on. I mean, so you're at the second shit I served
show. With, they absolutely loved it. And most of them went on to be doctors and super happy with their program. I, on the other hand, realized I picked the wrong program. I mean, this is on me. But I still had faith that AmeriCorps was the right program. So I went to the new site. Again, it didn't work out. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take a couple months. I'm going to foster a puppy and I'm going to reconsider what my options were. And the 2 options I applied for and eventually got accepted to was something called Northwest Youth Corps, which is based just outside of Eugene, Oregon. And it's a lot of outdoor wilderness survival work, trail building, working with young teams. And the other one was the National Civilian Community Corps, which has branches all around the country, as some of you know. And I was specifically looking at the Sacramento campus. And those were my 2 options. I got accepted to both. But unfortunately, I got a gaping wound in my stomach because I had a failed botched surgery and a staph infection. So wasn't able to do Northwest Youth Corps. I had to delay a couple months, which forced me to do AmeriCorps NCCC. Which ended up being the best decision of my life. And to this point, the best year of my life. And I'm sure I'll talk mostly about that year of NCCC going forward. But a lot of things had to go wrong to make NCCC happen for me, but a lot of things also I got lucky with placement and with my projects and just the people that were around me. But yeah, I moved down to Sacramento from Oregon and started that year of service, which it's, NCCC, unlike VISTA, my VISTA year was direct service, hands-on, a lot of physical manual work. Most people do them in reverse order because VISTA requires a college degree, or it did back then, and NCCC does not. So I was on the very oldest threshold of Corps members in NCCC that are even allowed. I just
I
got
think
in
it's
under that
19
age
through
limit.
20. Is it 19 through 24 or 18 through 24?
It was 18 because my roommates were 18 through 24, but you could turn 25 during the program, which is what I
Okay,
did. I think they might have upped that to 26 now. I'm not quite sure. You have to look into that one.
I will.
I think to recruit more members, they kind of bumped it up. But yeah, so I was just on that top echelon. But I love that because I was able to serve kind of as a bit of a mentor, especially to my 18-year-old roommate, who I was lucky enough to just visit now over a decade later. Just went out and saw him and climbed a mountain with him 5 days ago. So
Oh,
I
that's
really
awesome.
made lifelong connections in that program. And it's really guided me through everything I've done since, many of the stuff you listed before. And I'll ramble about that more as we continue to talk.
Yeah, and I definitely want you to ramble about all of your, because it's really interesting how you go, how a lot of members, most of alumni that I speak to, you go from one opportunity to another and it just kind of pops up, right? Like it's just something where right time, right person, and it works out that way. And to your point about VISTA placements can be awesome, and if the project and the program is structured well, and sometimes it's just not that way. So
Yeah.
it's great. And I also have a philosophy in life that it's easier sometimes to figure out what you don't want and what kind of experiences you don't want to have, to figure out what you do want. And then I always take that and I wrap it into my values. I'm like, I know that I don't want to feel that way, be with those type of people or whatever. I know that this is actually more aligned with the way I want to live my life. So you did NCCC, you got your hands dirty. I think you were building houses and blazing trails and doing everything else to the sun. What were some of the projects that really impacted you during your service year?
Yeah, so I was in 4 different projects and I adored all of them for different reasons. The first one you alluded to was home construction for migrant farm workers. That was for the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. That was in the Coachella Valley in Southern California, so super hot. So the idea of I had up to that point had never taken a nap in my life. I think it's a mixture of high energy and attention deficit and all sorts of other stuff, but I had never napped other than being a baby. But then on that, it was so hot while we were building these homes together that we would take siestas every day. And at first I was like, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep in the middle of the day, especially while like getting worked up and working hard in the morning, building homes. And yeah, I was able to pass out after like 4 days, like perfectly on time at like 10 a.m. Wake up at, I think we woke up like 1:30 in the afternoon and got back to
Wow.
work. So they were really like 12-hour days we were putting in with that siesta in the middle from kind of sunrise to sundown. And I just adored that project. I'd never been to, Southern California in my life. And we were in the desert and it was just a new climate to me, new life. And in NCCC, you're living with, 10 other young people out of a van. And I was kind of a selfish person at that point in my life. And I wasn't good at working with people. I always chose, if I was going to do a sport, it's going to be like golf or tennis, something I don't need to, I'm not a team player. I just wasn't at that point in my life. I was such a kind of reclusive, social, like solo person.
And so that's exactly the opposite of NCCC, because you all live together, work together,
eat together, sleep in the same room together. Like,
shop
there's
together.
no privacy. Yeah, it's everything. You become family, you become enemies, oftentimes people become lovers. Like I found a partner in NCCC, but not on my team, which I think allowed it to survive for a good amount of time. But it's just a once in a lifetime program opportunity. And it really took all of my weaknesses and made them strengths, I think, at that point in my life. because I would have
That's really
continued on a
precious.
trajectory of, being selfish, being, worrying about myself, not being like, it's a very militaristic program. And I say that in the good aspects of like, rise at 5 a.m. to do physical training, which is not, my lazy butt would never wake up before 11 a.m. before this program. And now in my life, I am that type of person that wants to rise early and see the sunrise. But I remember going for runs, in the desert, because the desert's freezing at night and deathly during the day. So wake up at like 4:30 a.m. to go for a run in the desert before doing home construction for 12 hours. And, after just living like that, you don't really, it's kind of hard to become lazy again, I think, in life,
Hmm.
because you realize how much potential you really have, or how much potential the human body has in terms of exerting energy. So
And
that was just great.
it's so energizing, right? Like you have I've been falling into this habit of staying up late and getting up late. And it's funny because every time I get up late, I'm like, sleep begets more sleep. So the
Mm.
more tired, the more sleep that you have. I mean, now sleep is important, right? But it's also there's a balance of getting up. I love the hours before, like right when the sun is rising, you can hear the birds start to rustle around and start to sing, and yeah, so that's so cool and that it got to you at a young age. I didn't do AmeriCorps when I was young. I did AmeriCorps in my mid-30s, but I worked in the fitness industry when I was in my early 20s. And so I learned fitness and I learned nutrition. Now I
Mm.
know it. I don't always do it, but but it was so important in my early 20s to understand fitness and like how you can use your body, and just the energy flow of such a you know rigorous routine.
Yeah.
So you did 2 years of NCCC. Were you a NCCC leader your second year?
No, I applied. I mean, actually, I only did 1 year of
Oh,
NCCC, two
okay,
total years of AmeriCorps, 4
gotcha.
projects in my 1 year of NCCC. So I applied to be a team leader and a core member at the same time for my 1 year. And when it came down to it, I just finished college, took me 5 years. Then I did that kind of underwhelming year of VISTA. And I was like, okay, do I want a leadership position because it'll look better on my resume, or do I want to like really just work my butt off as a core member? And I decided I want to work my butt off as a core member. I don't want to be in charge of, other people, because I want to focus
Yeah,
on kind of building myself. And it's hard to go inward when you have to worry about so many external factors and keep track of people and data and stuff. So I felt like it was kind of a respite for me, even though I put so much energy into the projects. I wasn't responsible for anyone but myself. And I think that was a really big thing. I mean, and being a good team member, which is what I was learning. But I'm so glad, like in hindsight, that I didn't end up being a team leader. Our team leader, I just watched her struggle and not really be able to enjoy the program, because she was a core member who turned into a team leader, and she would always be
mm.
like, man, being a core member was so much better. I wish I could be a core member again. And then I think the stress got to her, because she ended up eating one of our other core members' birthday cake, um,
Oh no.
and caused this big dramatic mess. And we can laugh about it now, but at the time it was like serious. It's like, what side am I going to take? My team leader who
Oof.
sabotaged the core member, and it was good drama.
Oh,
And at
that's
the
funny.
time it felt huge, and now we look back and we're like, that was so silly that we made that such a dramatic thing. But
That could
yeah,
be a funny short video. I
yeah.
don't know. For some reason I see that as an animation or something. Okay, so you did your service year. Is there anything else that you want to reflect on your service year before we learn all of the other adventures that you've taken in your life?
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of alluding to, how exhausting life can be and how energizing hard work can be. And, I did that home construction project for my first round, which was just out the gate, like super hard work. Like I didn't have a background in construction. None of my teammates did. We had to learn from scratch and then put in a bunch of sweat equity. And we like met with the families whose houses we were building. It was just so rewarding to watch them kind of, start moving in. And it was
That's
so
cool.
impactful. And then that immediately went to youth environmental camp restoration out in
Mm.
Camp Sealth on Vashon Island, a beautiful island out in Washington State. There's just bald eagles and seals
Oh,
everywhere in the Puget Sound. But again, like really hard grunt work. We're building trails. We're like taking the chainsaws out. We're digging trenches. We're up to our neck in the Puget Sound, like scraping the docks and trying to get all the sea life off so they don't ruin the docks. And it's
wow.
just wild, literally wild work. And it just made our team, I think, so close. But then my third project was fourth grade assistant teaching at an elementary school in Sacramento. And by far the most exhausting job out of all of them.
Oh my gosh, that's
And
funny.
yeah, even more so than the next one was the most physically exhausting, trail building in Silver Falls State Park in Oregon and doing waterfall repair, which is
Oh
still my
yeah.
favorite job title I can say to this day is waterfall repairman.
Can,
Um,
can you give us an example of how you repair a waterfall? Because
yeah,
I feel like
so
they're just like natural things. And
exactly.
so like, how do you repair something that's built by nature or
Yeah, that's the
formed
hard
by
thing is
nature?
it's just restoration of what was naturally, what naturally occurred over thousands of years of water wearing away stone and earth. But FEMA, made a federal declaration, which sent us there because there was so much flooding in the area. The natural like sides of the waterfalls just were worn away and decimated. And then there's also walkways behind five of the waterfalls, I believe, in Silver Falls State Park. I was just there last week visiting it to show my fiance all the work that we had done there.
That's so
So
cool.
basically, someone would go in, put a climbing harness. I don't even know what they're called, but the belay hook behind the waterfall in the stone. We clamp in and then we dangle over the waterfall to where it was eroding behind the waterfall and using natural materials to try to build out the walkway and support it so that generations ahead could continue to walk behind that waterfall and experience nature to the full effect in that beautiful park, which I highly recommend everyone go to Silver Falls State Park in Oregon. It
Yeah.
was they applied for national park status back in like the 30s or something. The only reason, or not in the 30s, I think much later, but the only reason they weren't granted national park status was because their old growth trees were clear cut back in the 20s or the 10s or something.
Mm,
But otherwise, it's completely majestic place. I mean, the trees are still gigantic. They just aren't 600 years old. They're only
interesting. I didn't
now a
even know
couple
that there
hundred.
was some certification that was needed for national state park designation, but learn things every day. And I'll just say that I thought the most dangerous thing that I did during my service year was chainsaw training. And I learned how to use a chainsaw, but I was not dangling from a
Mm,
rope behind the waterfall. Now I did learn that I don't ever want to use a chainsaw because they scare me to death and you could chop your leg off. But that is so cool. And how fun is it that you can go back to the park and see the work that you did? It's still there. That's very cool.
absolutely. Yeah, I took a ton of video and I name dropped you in one of the videos. So hopefully I can find that
Oh,
at some point
sweet.
and share it with you because yeah, it brought back a whole flood of emotions. And luckily I was also the chainsaw person for our team, but I wasn't dangling over the waterfall and doing any chainsaw work. I think that'd be
That's
a little
good.
too far for me.
That's
Yeah,
great.
but otherwise, yeah, my favorite project, my favorite place on earth, to be honest, like I definitely want my ashes spread there at Silver Falls State Park. I just had such a good time. And I got Corps member of the round for working my butt off, which I was really excited about, I guess, at that point in my life. But it was, mostly about how I grew internally as a person there, kind of rounding out my NCCC program and seeing it all come to a head. And really, honestly, trying for the first time in my life. I had never tried
Mm.
anything my whole life. I'd never opened a textbook, never studied for a test. Like I told you, never woken up before 11 a.m. And I decided on my road trip to Sacramento, like I'm gonna put everything into this. Like if I can,
Oh no. Oh, he's back. That was fast. But now you're muted.
it
All right.
shut down and restarted
That
instantaneously.
was very fast. That was like zoom fast. Okay, so you were saying you were just the way that you rounded out your service year and how you grew
Yeah.
internally.
I mean, trying for the first time in my life. So,
Yes.
I told myself on my road trip to my service site in Sacramento, like I'm gonna work my butt off. I'm gonna put everything I have into this. If at the end of it I have nothing to give, like that's kind of my goal. Just be spent by the end of this. Don't say I wish I would have worked harder. I wish I would have been a better teammate. I wish I would have learned more or read more in my free time. Like I did everything I could. Try to be prime physically, mentally, and I think that's what made it the best year of my life. Just that motivation to just be as good as I can be and kind of push myself to my personal limits just to see what those were. And
I
yeah,
think
that's
I think that that's like such great advice to think about like everything that we do, and maybe not like, and I'm not talking about perfectionism or anything, but like, this is a little philosophical, but just waking up in the morning, not everybody gets to do that. And so whatever we're pouring ourselves into, whatever we're doing for that day or for that moment, and, whether it's your job or being present with your family or your friends or whatever, like doing it full out. Like, what if we just did everything full out all the time and we just did have no regrets, like similar to the end of your service year? Like, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, we'd all be a lot happier with ourselves.
I think so too. I mean, I just think, I don't know anyone who's like, I stared at TikTok for 6 hours today and I feel great. So I do think there's something to that. I think there are limits that we should put on ourselves. Like there was a time in my life where I'm like, if I just sprint everywhere, I'll be able to experience more in my life. And then I'm that awkward guy you see down the street in plain clothes, just running to the grocery store and running to the coffee shop. And I don't want
I
to be
really
that
actually
guy.
wish
I
that
tried
we
it for a
lived
bit.
closer. I really wish that we lived closer because I would love to see that. That's
So
so
you could
funny.
see me just sprinting down the street. Yeah.
Yeah, I have been trying to intentionally, if I'm standing in line. The other day I was getting a prescription and I was in line for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, don't look at your phone. Don't look at your phone. Just like
Nice.
Like Eckhart Tolle says, just focus on your breathing and focus on being alive and just look at everything. But it's so easy to just like, scroll, but being intentional where our attention is important. So it sounds like you're in
That's
Triple C
another thing to
here.
look back on fondly. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I had no phone service during 99% of AmeriCorps and
Yeah.
Triple C. And it truly made my life better. Like I always think of that when I start looking at my phone too much and my battery's dying halfway through the day. I'm like, okay, what was the best time in my life? Oh, it was when I didn't even have a smartphone. I just had a normal slider phone and I didn't have service on it. So I don't equate, my cell phone with happiness. I think the more I'm using it, I probably have other things that are unsettled. And I usually do some inward looking when my battery is dying halfway through the day. And I'm like, what's causing me to put my eyes down over and over? So I think it's a good monitor.
Yeah, I had an interview with Noah Smock, I think back in May. I don't know which episode it was, and he did NCCC, and he was very intentional on why he chose NCCC. And it sounds and through his story and his journey, you both have a similar sort of reflection on how you intentionally went into it, choosing to go into it, like you saying, I didn't necessarily want to be a leader because I wanted to focus on myself, and then coming out of it like really, really physically and mentally transformed, like mentally disciplined, transformed on the other side. That's huge. So if anybody's listening to this, I know NCCC is recruiting right now, so I'll make sure the links are in the notes. But
Nice.
yeah, but this is exciting. Too bad I'm too old to do NCCC. Bummer.
I mean, team leader, you can be, I think, 95.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, there's no limit on team leader. There didn't used to be. And I would highly recommend that. Like, I would love to, in 10 years, go be a team leader. I think it would be amazing.
That would be so fun. But your crew would love that.
I think they'd have a good time.
Yeah. So I want to follow your journey. I love everything that you're saying about NCCC, and it's so important for us AmeriCorps alums to reflect on the transformation that we made, or that we went through during our service year. And I think what's also equally as important is to understand how that experience either gave us, like for me, my service year gave me confidence. I had no idea that I could visualize a project, make it happen, implement it, and then reflect back on it and either do it again or get recognized for something. I had no idea I had that in me. I just was a mom at the time, just a mom. So I think it's important for us to reflect back, but that also prepared me for the next challenge and the next challenge and the next challenge. And without that opportunity to serve in AmeriCorps, I would have never had the confidence in myself to do some of the crazy things that I've stuck my neck out to try to do, in the name of national service, actually. So tell us a little bit about your journey, because I definitely want to get to and have enough time to talk about what you're doing now, because that's fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. So, I mean, there's so much that sticks with me. And, I think it goes back to, it really goes back to childhood. I wasn't religious. I had no reason to do service or volunteer. The only thing I can really recall is my hometown had a really bad flooding. And my mom just said, get in the car. We're going, because we were spared. Our house was spared. Get in the car. We're going to go help. And we just kept going in people's basements, trudging through water, just pulling out their memories and their cherished items. And again and again and again, we just kept doing that for different houses. And I didn't really know why. I'm so confused. Like, I can swim in people's basements. Why is this happening? I was a pretty young kid. But the why of why we're doing it is like, that's just what you do. Like, just be a good person to fellow human. Like, and that really stuck with me, but it was never really formalized. So, that's kind of what set the foundation for why I decided to do any service, starting in mostly undergrad. And then what I took away from this formalized AmeriCorps experience was realizing that first year was kind of a waste of my time, because I picked a bad fit. But what I learned from that is kind of learning how to step away and follow my heart and do, what's authentically right for me. And that program, like, on paper, just was not a good fit, wasn't the right fit. And ever since that moment, I would say, like, I picked a bad program, shouldn't have done that. I don't think I've ever made another mistake like that where someone would look at it on paper and be like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I think the rest of the things I've done since that time, oh, this makes sense. This makes sense. Oh, you have skills here. Oh, you wanted to gain skills here. So everything else is kind of makes sense.
I wanted to just point out too, that you were in your early 20s, and for you to be so introspective to actually take responsibility for that decision, because I think so many people don't want to be accountable and they want to live in the victim, and they want to say VISTA is a terrible program and I had a terrible supervisor and everything was awful and the world is against me. But to take accountability, to say, yeah, actually, I made a bad choice, and I love the fact that you said you didn't want to be a quitter, and you stuck it out and you did what you need to do, and you learned something from it, right? Like, that's something that to just double down on situations that are difficult. I have a book, it's actually in the back behind me. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And I love that stoic concept where it's like, you got to go through it to get to the other side. And it's uncomfortable. It can be scary. It can be, all these things, but the whole time, like, you're learning along the way. But I want to acknowledge that, being 20 something and taking accountability for your choices is very mature.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I do feel like I had to, as people say, like, grow up really quick. And a lot of that came from my own personal demons, struggling. You were talking about fitness before. Like, I got into fitness at a young age because I have body dysmorphia, and I was a very obese kid who turned the other way and became anorexic. And then I became vegan for 8 years. And there were all these things that I was trying to, like, overcome, even if they were real obstacles or obstacles I placed there. Things I had to just overcome from my personal life of, being raised by a single mother who was constantly at work to provide for us. And all these things, I think, built me up and make me stronger. But I never put everything together until AmeriCorps, of all these things that I gained in terms of, I guess, resilience and things that I was just overcoming that had made me a strong person and an introspective person. And it all kind of just came to a head at this AmeriCorps NCCC year, and gave me time to process it, because once the work was done, I was exhausted. I didn't have technology. It was all like time to process the last basically 22 years of my life, which I think is what I value most of everything. Is it just the no better time to be introspective, I don't think, than a program where you're purposely giving yourself everything you had in my situation for service. And then, like, why am I doing this? Not only why am I doing AmeriCorps, but why am I waking up each and every morning making that choice? Because it is a choice, and I continue to do it and be here for it and love it more and more every day, every year. So yeah.
That's great. Yes, and it is true. Some of the things that are carried along with us, and something that you said made me think about my service year, where we were able to use our volunteer time as like 10% of our service hours. And so I was in my mid-30s, and I was coaching my kids in soccer, and my program manager said, you can use that time as volunteer hours. And I think I've told this story before. I was like, but is it volunteering? I'm a parent. Isn't this what parents do? And then I looked on the sidelines, and there were, 20 other parents just sitting there drinking their coffee while I was putting together a practice and a strategy. And even though they were 5 years old, I was telling them that there's chocolate candy bars inside the soccer ball, so everyone needs to go to the ball and not away from the ball. But I didn't know that volunteering and service was number one. I didn't even know that it was an actual industry that globally, people are involved in employee volunteering. And so reflecting back on my service year, there were things that I didn't know existed, and I learned that through my AmeriCorps year. So
yeah, I relate to a lot of that. I mean, just quickly, I don't think I'll ever be part of a more diverse program than NCCC. I had, we have some students that had just finished Job Corps to get their GED. So they're just graduating high school. And then we have other people who have master's degrees, all in, 250 people on one campus working together for this on the same mission. I think that's another thing that made it the best year of my life. It's like so many perspectives, many of which I loved, and many of which I honestly hated and disagreed with. And I was like, I don't agree with the way you live life. But I think that's what made it so great, is we were able to have kind of constructive disagreements and arguments in the middle of hard labor work. And you really learned the variety of perspectives people have in this world. And then just to relate to you real quick, in my VISTA year that didn't go so well, I became a head coach for the Boys and Girls Club baseball team. And I would say 90% of my kids didn't know how to, what hand to put their glove on. So it was bad news bears, honestly. But one of the best experiences of my life. And we ended up taking 4th place in the whole state of Oregon. So that was one of the biggest accomplishments in my life up to that point. So that was how after I was done with my work at AmeriCorps VISTA, I would coach youth baseball. So it was pretty good.
That's very cool. Very cool. So where do we want to go from here?
I guess, what is next in life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, after your service year, you kind of reflect back, and then you just kind of, what do? You dust off your pants and wash them, and then hang them up in the closet. And then how do you even find your next step? Because I'm not as familiar with NCCC. So is there a period where you're able to job search or look for other opportunities? Like, how did you decide what you wanted to do after that? Because I can imagine like assimilating back into kind of, domestic life, we'll say. What was that like?
Transition was tough. And, they do, at least back when I served, which is now over a decade ago, they did put a heavy emphasis on transition and looking at careers, looking at jobs and professional development. But for me, it was like so overwhelming, because I had loved my year, but I was also deeply exhausted, frustrated at that point. So I decided to do a nice little 6-month road trip with a partner I'd met in the program. And our goal was go from Sacramento back to her home in New Jersey and hit up, 12 to 15 national parks along the way, living out of our car, to give us buying more time to process what we had just gone through, and also growing together, as a couple, as a partnership. And that was great, but it was hard to find work, especially at that time. I graduated at the The economy had tanked in 2008 and then tanked even lower in 2010, 11, 12. So it was not looking pretty, but I ended up pivoting completely. I didn't want to sell out, but I did want some money. So for the first and only time in my life up to this point, I worked at a corporate software company. That was my first job, and it was soul sucking because it was looking at screens, 9 hours a day in a
Wow.
fun office, which was such a shift from living out of a tent in the woods in Oregon building trails. And I couldn't, it was soul sucking for me. It was very hard.
Mhm.
One of the hardest times in my life. And I have some videos of me back then, and I look completely drained and sad and have no energy. And I quit that after 10 months, went to go work at a food co-op, and then immediately moved to an organic farm and lived and worked on the farm, just growing organic vegetables, selling at farmers markets, and getting my hand in the soil while I applied to grad school, and was accepted. So that was my natural is sell out, realize you're not a sellout, and move to an organic hippie farm, a little commune farm that had been around. It was a nonprofit education center and farm that was funded by
Mhm.
the Broners, the soap people. So they came to visit
Oh,
and had a
cool.
soap party with us, which was a lot of fun. And it was the complete opposite of the software job. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad I did that, and it prepped me for 2 years of grad school where I studied public administration back out in Oregon because I fell in love with the state in my first go around. And nothing from there is linear or makes sense, but I studied public administration because from all my volunteering, I thought, oh, I want to be a public servant for real, like actually get paid
Mm.
over $2 an hour, maybe get paid eventually 6 figures as a city manager or something to that effect, a policymaker in DC. And that's when I was offered, the federal job to go work in the Obama White House upon graduation. And I worked for the Domestic Policy Council and helped inform some of the biggest policies in the country under
Wow.
the 44th president of the United States, which is just wild to me that I can even say that because a lot of the people that worked alongside me weren't AmeriCorps graduates. They were, the Harvards, the Yales, the legacy students. So imposter syndrome wanted to creep up on me, but I didn't feel like it was imposter syndrome. I just felt like I had a unique story of someone that was working in Washington.
How did you find that intern opportunity?
Well, it's actually funny because, I just left my job as a career coach at the University of Wisconsin, and I'm really into working with students, but it wasn't from my intern or my
Ah.
internship office on campus. It was just through my private searching because I had worked for the Obama campaign as an intern back in 2007, 2008. And I had, heavy interest in the administration. It was the first president I was able to vote for my age. And so I had a lot of, as a lot of young people did back then, felt like they were part of this movement. So being able to work on the tail end, it was like, it all came full circle. Like I
Gotcha.
campaigned for this person, now I'm working there. But my internship director at my grad program actually told me, why are you applying to this? You'll never get accepted. And you've never showed an interest in federal government. And I was like, none of that is true. Like I've told you, my dream job is to be a program director for AmeriCorps. And that's pretty much why I went to grad school. I thought, oh, I loved NCCC. Perhaps I could be a unit leader or a program director down the road. So I
Wow.
felt very unseen by that internship director. But
Yeah.
as someone that eventually went on to do that type of work with students, I thought, okay, never say anything to that effect to any student ever. If they say that's their dream and their goal, like it is, that's, it's coming
Yeah.
straight from the source. Why deny them their own reality? So I found that
I
very
had
strange, but it motivated me for sure.
an interesting situation happen to me actually in high school, kind of similar. My advisor in high school said, don't apply to go to college. And I was a
Hmm.
four-year varsity athlete in 4 sports. So I varsityed in 4 sports, my freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. And my senior year, I was the mascot. So, I mean, I had a little bit of I don't know. I feel like I had something to give at college now that I
Yeah.
know about, what college life was. But he told me, he's like, don't even apply, don't take the SATs, just go to the community college and then you can transfer. And I thought I was like the smartest person while everybody was in there, in the library taking their SATs. And while it did all work out, and I really am happy the way things worked out, to your point, if somebody, you would never tell somebody not to do something that they were excited about doing, even if it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, even lending your perspective, an alternative perspective, that's
Yes.
fine. But to try to guide someone else's life to that degree, I just don't agree with it. And our words just carry so much weight as mentors or
Mhm.
advisors or just older people in general, that I remember so many nuggets, negative and positive, from when I was young, and I've just latched onto them. So now, as a professional mentor at times, as a career coach, most recently, like, I realize how much weight my words carry, and I try to choose them very carefully. But I also, I love pushing back on ideas and theories and different career choices, and give them alternative perspectives. And instead of going to work for Goldman Sachs, why not take off a year and go do AmeriCorps? Even though your parents say that's the worst idea in the world. That's a conversation that, is common. And probably a lot of people listening are like, my parents don't want me to do AmeriCorps. Well, you really need to look inside and realize and tell them and show them how many people have gone on from service programs like this. Michelle Obama, she's an alum
Mhm.
of an AmeriCorps program, or helped co-found an AmeriCorps program. And she did quite well for herself. So you don't always need to jump directly into the lucrative, high-paying, well-known career. There's a lot of alternative paths or stutter steps or, forks in the road. You can take the road less traveled for a bit, and you can always jump back. So
Our
I
president of the Senate out here in Maryland, is a Teach for AmeriCorps alumni. I mean,
awesome.
and I think we have maybe two U.S. senators that are alumni. I should know those off the top of my head. Fetterman, I think, is one,
I didn't know that.
and there's someone else and I can't
Very
remember
cool.
their name, but that's a good point. And then also, like, you get your education awards. So if you do want to go back to university or school or whatever, in my 9 to 5 today, I was in a meeting with a local community college talking about their culinary program that they have. It's a 2-year culinary program. And I remember somebody who took their education award and went to Italy, or enrolled in a culinary program and went to Italy to learn
Hmm.
culinary skills. So,
That's awesome.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
like
I know so many
that's
people have done outdoor wilderness
us.
training.
Yes,
I have no idea
outward
what I
bound.
did with mine. I think I bought a laptop or something, but yeah.
All right, you're back. Okay, career coach, giving people good advice.
Yeah. And I mean, I've done, as you know, like 20 things since then. I founded companies, one, a benefit corporation called The Way Out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that helps people who are formerly incarcerated find access to high-paying jobs so they can improve their quality of life. Um, and
Is that organization still around?
around and doing better than ever. Got funded by the Milwaukee Bucks, got funded by Google. They're killing it. I gave up my equity in the company, but Ellie and Ruben are still running it and doing great
What's the
things
name
with
of
it.
it?
It's called The Way Out. And now
I
there's a
saw that.
nonprofit arm to the benefit corporation called My Way Out.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So they're doing amazing things and they're amazing people. And I was lucky enough to, be right place, right time, to help with that. And also, eventually jumped to Silicon Valley to work for nonprofit tech, helping kind of, going around the world, helping promote internet access, internet equity issues. Something that's going to become more and more important is privacy issues in terms of
Mhm.
technology, which I was really happy to do for Mozilla, which is, the Firefox company, which was, it was a lot different than the work I'd done in the past, but it really connected with everything because I was able to be kind of a Robin Hood of philanthropic efforts to help entrepreneurs who had a good idea related to education or workforce development to really help, change the world through small funds that could help build a company with a good idea. because we did it all through a lens of equity and trying to be inclusive, and people that were traditionally let out of tech and entrepreneurs that were left out of technological conversations kind of have a seat at the table. So that was a huge, part of my career and something I was really happy with. Also, I guess I had that dream that I told you about, go do improv, be a filmmaker. So in 2019, after having that stint with Mozilla, I was like, all right, well, what I haven't done yet is try my hand at that. So I moved to LA. I worked with Sundance, the Film Institute, and studied improv. Finally, it took me 15 years to get back to it. I wanted to do it at 18, but instead I did it closer to 30. And it was one of the best times of my life. And I'm so glad I did that. And when you talk about how AmeriCorps gives you a new perspective to everything you do, take an improv class. It'll really play into everything you do in terms of everything from job interviews to working with the public. When you start a company, travel, the way that you travel or communicate with people. It's just, I found myself going back to a place before my brain got all programmed by graduate school and worrying about job interviews and just worrying so much about public perception, back to a more youthful place where I can think on my feet, because I think that's what people praise me most for when I was young, is like, wow, you're so quick-witted and, you can think on your feet and you say such interesting things so quickly. And then I felt like I lost that somewhere along the line because I was taught to think in this very linear fashion. So if anything else, join AmeriCorps, #1, and then take an improv class.
I love that advice. That is great life advice.
I think it is. Both will do you tremendous benefit for sure. And then, I eventually went on to run a nonprofit, become an executive director. Another thing I never thought I'd do in my life. It was for an urban preservation nonprofit in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that tried their best to advocate for historic buildings, especially in underserved neighborhoods of Milwaukee, and help preserve the culture and richness of that city and that very diverse city and their neighborhoods, because gentrification is a real issue and contributes to a lot of cities really looking the same and really pushing out, people, families that have been there for generations. And we were doing our best to stop that from happening. And then
it sounds like you're like really after your service year, everything's been so intentional and from I would say a service perspective, but I feel like it's more of following your interest or following your, like, this is going to sound so woo-woo, but following your essence of like who Craig is, like just following that and like interjecting that in for a minute into a field or a company or an organization and getting something out of it, but then also leaving a little bit of like the Craig essence behind. It's just neat. It's very cool. And it reminds me of an AmeriCorps member that I coached for a little while, and she had a jobs bucket list. And one of the jobs that she wanted to do was to be a bartender. And so after I checked in with her about a month after she told me about her bucket list, she was a bartender. And then she told me she wanted to be a flight attendant, and now she's a flight attendant. Awesome. And it's just kind of cool. Like all of your experiences, I hope people understand too, that we're in a different day and age where like it's okay to do different things and not stay in a job that either you love it or hate or whatever for years and years and years and years. When your time is up, and it's okay to move on and find something new.
Yeah. And I was, humiliated as a young person because a lot of people told me like, you're going to be branded a job hopper, your career is going to be ruined. And I took that advice from, the older generation as doctrine. And I was like, okay, well, I'm screwed because I've already had, like 8 jobs by the time I got to college. I'd been fired from Walmart twice and Target once, which I'm very proud of to this day. But like you're saying, after AmeriCorps, the only job that I took that I felt wasn't of Craig's essence was that tech kind of content writing job right after NCCC. And it was only 10 months, but it was the only thing I've done since that time where I'm like, this is not authentically me and it's not making my life better. And anytime I am doing something that is authentically me and making my life better, there have been natural times where it's like, oh, it's time to pivot. It's time to try something new. I've helped out here. And I think my skills really are in helping other people be their best and do their best. And that so far in my life hasn't been starting my own company or doing my own thing. It's been helping a lot of other people do their things. And that requires kind of being a consultant and doing that job hopping, which I've been happy to do. And I've been able to make a lot of positive impact, I think. So even though on paper, you know, my resume might be 6 pages long, I think it's 99% of it has been useful, helpful, not harmful. At the end of the day, that's really what I want, is to not do harm, do no harm. And, you know, I worked for President Obama, was lucky enough to meet him. And his
Wow.
advice was to be useful. That was his big thing. And I think Sasha or Malia, one of his daughters, was the one that added that. So be kind, be useful, be fearless were the 3 things.
Wow.
And it was, you know, amazing advice. And I really do. I don't think we're made to be cogs in a machine. So usefulness, I don't tie that to productivity. I do think they're 2 very separate things, but useful in terms of what do you truly want to do in life, and figure out what that is, and then just sprint, like, you know, put everything you got into it, because why not? You know, I love things that are hard. I love the idea of like, that's hard. That doesn't dissuade me from wanting to do it. That's a challenge, and I do want to do it. So,
Yeah, it's like bringing
yeah,
it, like the usefulness is bringing value, right? Like bringing in your essence of how you can make a project better, or make a, you know, a thing better. That's really cool. Do they have shirts? We should make shirts.
I might get sued by
Oh yeah, that's
the man
right. Darn it.
himself, but I'm fine with getting sued. So actually, yeah, check out my e-store next Thursday.
Yeah, okay, so we've been chatting for almost an hour, so let's do you want to go to the arc of what you're up to now and how you've made this change and what you've decided to do, and take us on the adventure? Is there anything in between that you still feel like you want to reflect on to make the story complete, or the
I think
story as of now?
yeah, I mean, I'll do a little bit, I guess, of rounding out. I mean, I just, like we've alluded to, I've done so many different things and a variety of things. And like you said before, one of the pieces of advice you like to give is, you know, finding out what you don't want to do is almost as important as finding out what you do want to do. But you're not going to find out what you do or don't want to do if you don't take risks and you don't put yourself out there. So I have done that. I'm going to continue to do that. And one more thing, you know, on my bucket list was I want to do the Peace Corps. And, you know, like I said, I was kind of scared to do it when I was young. I was just scared of travel in general. But I put myself out there, got accepted, went out to Senegal, West Africa to do business development work. And it just so happened to be in February 2020, the end of February 2020. So it wasn't more than 2.5 weeks later that the buzz started going around about this weird bug going around, this virus, the coronavirus, as we called it back then. And I had no idea what that meant for me, you know, 1 month into my service year, which was supposed to be close to 3 years. But what it meant was a chartered flight out of Senegal back to the US, where I had sold everything, quit my executive director job, ended relationships, said goodbye to friends, said goodbye to family, gave up my apartment. I had nothing to my name, not a single thing that wasn't in my backpack I brought to Africa. So ended up at an Airbnb in quarantine and went on a 17,000-mile road trip after that, just wandering until the world opened back up, jobs opened back up. And we talked about the amount of time for introspection in AmeriCorps, but that was my midlife round of introspection. And it was a very useful time, definitely. A lot of mindfulness, a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga. And what it made me realize is, what are the most important things in the world to me? Well, romantic relationships to me do mean a lot. I love having a partner to go through life with. I love if I see a sunset to say, hey, look over there, rather than just take it in myself. That's important to me. So that was a major priority. I want that to eventually turn into, you know, being a parent. I love kids. I've always loved kids. Pretty old. I have no kids. It doesn't make sense. I am Uncle Craig to an amazing set of nibblings, salmon Thai, but I do want to experience that first person fatherhood. So that was number 2. What's important to me. Number 3, doing something that's not harmful. Like I said, a job that's meaningful, impactful.
Mm-hmm.
That means a lot. But I also, I love adventures. I love putting myself in precarious situations. I love being uncomfortable. Sleeping on a hardwood gym floor in AmeriCorps and CCC, it makes you uncomfortable, and I miss that. So that leads into, I think, what I'm doing next. I also have a love of travel. So I will be spending the next year of my life. I just quit my job about, I don't know, 8 days ago at this point. Sold everything I pretty much own that I can't put in a backpack, and will, with the love of my life, my fiance, be traveling the world for the next year. So incorporating my love of travel, my love of discomfort. We won't be doing it with a high budget. It'll be extremely low budget. We're going to be making content, and we're thinking of it as making videos, writing stories for our future children to look back on, and see what type of people we were, and why it's okay to take risks, quit comfortable jobs to live cheaply, dangerously sometimes, to really get what you want out of life. So we're calling that the Travel Twerps. And we're going to be making videos on YouTube. We have a prior following that we're going to kind of lean on, but we hope to gain new followers. Trying not to use TikTok because it feels a bit toxic, but Instagram, we'll be on Instagram, and then also writing blogs on medium.com. And we're just so thrilled. And if 5 people read it and watch it, but we have that content for our future kids, great.
Right.
If thousands decide to tune in, and maybe a couple sponsors are like, well, here's a free hat, and here's $10,000 to keep traveling for 2 more years to make content for us. Okay, fine, we'll take it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
we're
so
really looking forward to
exciting.
this adventure. And
And
my partner's a former flight attendant. Speaking of your flight
oh,
attendant
wow.
friend, so she knows her way around the skies. So our strengths, and she's fluent in Italian, French. Our strengths really play together well for this upcoming adventure.
That's so exciting that it's the ultimate leap of faith, right? Like just jumping in and doing something that you love, and it kind of goes back to what I said, where tomorrow's not guaranteed for us. And what a neat perspective that you and your partner are doing it as like a living history for your future family, and also for your future selves to see and remember the moments. And so how did you come up with, what is the name of it? Tourist
We call it
Twerps?
Travel Twerps.
Twerps.
Yeah, traveltwerps.com.
I love that.
Yeah, because we're both nerdy people, dorks at heart. She's a performer, a former theater kid who gave up that dream years ago, much like me giving up my love of filmmaking and improv. And we've deprived ourselves from, our true selves, like you're talking about before, like our souls. Like I had my service piece, but my media creation piece, entertainment piece, that piece I always kind of pushed down, because I was told a lot, like, you can't profit from that. You can't make a living from that. She was told the same thing when it came to theater and performance, singing. You can't make a living. So she kind of suppressed that and leaned into travel as a career. So, we're both trying to, I guess, unrepress, lean into what truly makes us happy, what we, literally when we talk about our dreams, pursuing our dreams, like these are the things that we dream of. We fall asleep and I picture myself making films, and she pictures herself being able to use the languages that she's learned, but also being able to create art and create content and things that she can share with the world and make them happier. So,
well, I'm
yeah,
definitely going to be following your adventure, because that just sounds like so much fun. And I was looking at some of the videos that you have already out there. So we'll definitely put all the links and everything that you need in the show notes. And so just kind of wrap things up, going back to AmeriCorps, what would you like to see of these, AmeriCorps alumni? What would be something that like we could do, or I don't know, what do you see for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough. Like you said, funding is always, it's so political or politicized, and I was the part of the Alumni Association for NCCC once I finished, but the organization, it was a little bit difficult to get that excitement going and for people to
Mm-hmm.
really have a way to have a centralized momentum, I guess, and talk about their service in creative ways. So even having this podcast and getting the word out there, if it's just like one or a handful of young people who are like, let's hear about some people who have done this cool program. Oh, I could totally see myself doing that. This person sounds just like me or what I hope to do. Like, I think it's just storytelling. And that's what I've been able to do with, my work at Sundance. And what I hope to do with improv, and now what I hope to do with this content, is just tell stories. And I think the more stories that people tell about these amazing experiences that we have, because like on my campus alone, we had 300 people with completely unique, entertaining, amazing stories. But they didn't really have a forum or medium to share those stories. So the more,
Mm-hmm.
and you said there's more people that are getting elected to office who have this background. So the more that they can name drop AmeriCorps, the more useful it's going to be, and the more likely people are going to be to fund it and support it and send their children into programs like this. And just realizing that it's not a gap year, it's not a delayed year, it's an impactful year that can lead into way more opportunities that you'd have before that year began. So the more centralized things like this podcast, like groups that are engaging, and I guess I feel like it's been a little too scattered in the past, where there's like a group in San Francisco and there's a group in
Yeah.
Chicago, but having those groups kind of using the power of digital mediums to kind of all come together and have our convention where we're able to preach the gospel of AmeriCorps.
I love that.
Because I want to buy in. I'm so proud to wear my old tattered AmeriCorps gear in public on service trips. And you run into an alumni and you just, no matter what their background is or where they're from, you'll have something to talk about. So just being able
Yeah.
to get that out and have people relate to it, and potential, AmeriCorps members kind of be able to have access to that. Because I think it's all about access, because I definitely,
Mm-hmm.
as an 18-year-old, I would have loved to have done, as I'm sure you feel, like AmeriCorps upon graduating high school, but I had no clue what that meant, or that there were even service programs like that. I learned about it halfway through college, and then I was like, okay, I'm all in, because it feels like NCCC was made for me. I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
was. I think it predates me a little bit, but
Yeah.
if I could have just known that that was possible earlier, like that's what it's about. So, getting into classrooms, which I was able to do as a representative during NCCC, talking to K-12 students about programs like this, that's where it all starts. Because it's a saying that's come up 100 times in my life as a mentor, but if you can see it, you can be it. But if you don't know
Mm-hmm.
it exists, especially if you come from a background where your parents didn't go to school, or they didn't do any sorts of programs, they were working in a factory from a young age, they don't know the alternative options to that, or running the family business. So just providing access in any way we're able to do that, which just blab a lot on your LinkedIn, blab a lot on your Instagram about your AmeriCorps experience. I have a Medium blog that I keep, and I wrote a story called My Life of Service, where I go into a lot of depth for why I chose to do the work I did. And I think it follows the narrative to getting my job at Pizza Hut at age 15 to working in the White House and things like that. And we all have weird winding paths, but when
Yeah.
you're in that program together, like, you're all family. So
Yeah, I think that that's great advice, and it is about storytelling and getting it out there. And thank you for plugging the podcast and saying this is like a great medium, and I definitely want to continue. My goal is to spend an entire year chatting with AmeriCorps alum, and I'm halfway through this year. So, and it's been quite an adventure, and everybody's journey is so different, and what we're all doing is different, but we're coming at it kind of with the same sort of I'm just going to keep calling it the same sort of essence of like service-ish sort of thing. So Craig, this was so wonderful, and I'm going to make sure that I am able to get all the links to all the resources. Thank you so much for sharing your time. And for folks, he's like moving out of his house in like 2 days. He doesn't really have any internet, so this was very special for us to be able to spend this time and knowledge. So thank you so very much. And for all of you out there, I will be next week. I've got a lot of people lined up that I'm doing some pre-interviews with. So we're going to have some great folks on. And thank you for your time, and thanks for tuning in, and keep telling your stories. Thanks so much, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you.